Okay. Well, yeah, we're totally live.
Oh, there we go. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Simon Buckley here with my dad, Jamie Buckley. And I don't, if you guys remember last week, we were talking a little bit about the Dragon's Chasm.
What happened to lifeoffiction.com?
Oh, yeah, that too.
I'm trying to teach you how to do the intro. Let's try this again.
Right.
Take 2. Go. Do it.
Hey, guys. This is Simon Buckley from lifeoffiction.com here with my dad, Jamie Buckley.
Hello, everybody. Okay, now I can tell you what I said I was going to tell you as soon as we went live. I love doing this with you, Simon. I really do.
I love doing it, too.
This is fun.
This whole practice intro stuff.
It is, because I want you to be able to do these. Eventually, I want you to do this stuff even without me. I want you to be able to have fun and to use this equipment to make stuff. Even for your own projects. I want to teach you how to do this. See, this is what you do when you are a dad and you love your kids. You teach them and you give them tools.
Cool. So one day I'll be like given the resources and I'll just be a pro right off the bat just because I spent time with my dad.
Teach a man to fish and he can make sushi. Okay, before we get started, I want to make sure that we go through a couple things. We need to do some shout-outs. We haven't done that in a little while, and also the hero of the month. And tell you the truth, the hero of the month is my dad, Daniel John Buckley. I just want to say I love you, Dad, and I'm so grateful for you. Anything that's good in me, it came from my dad and my mom, and my dad's awesome. So I was all panicked about the whole colonoscopy thing and getting cancer and stuff like that. And I called my dad, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And my father's the most loving man I've ever known. So compassionate, so considerate of other people. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I told him what had happened. I didn't want to share about the results from the colonoscopy. And he says, "Oh, you're going to be fine." What do you mean I'm going to be fine? He's like, "No." He goes, I have one, every 2 years or less. I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Yeah." He goes, and with technology today and, the ability with surgery, he says, "And I'm fine. And you're going to be fine." I thought he was crazy. I called your Uncle Jordan and my little brother. And he's like, I've been getting colonoscopy since I think he said like 25. I was like, what the crap? What?
You're a late bloomer, Dad.
I guess. And he says, "And you're going to be just fine." I was like, how come the men in this family don't tell me stuff like this? And he's like, don't be a boob. You're going to be fine. So I actually felt really good after talking to my dad and my brother. But I just want to say, Dad, you're my hero. I love you. You're absolutely awesome. I'd also like to give a shout out to who I think are the best neighbors in the whole world.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Caleb and Molly McClellans.
They're great people.
And they moved in, and gosh, we hit it off right away. So over the last, how long have they been here? 2 years?
Hasn't it even been? I think it's only been like 1 year.
No, it's got to be longer than that.
Because
they were here for Christmas last year. We gave them Christmas candy, didn't we?
I don't know. I don't remember. They're those cool people that you feel like you've known them for a long time.
Yeah, and eventually Caleb and Molly are going to hear this, and we love you. We think you're awesome.
And we need to do another Among Us game night soon.
Oh, I already talked to him this afternoon when he left for work. Well, left for work this morning. I was like, now that we're after Christmas, I was like, let's just play some games. He's like, let's do it. Anyway, you got to have awesome neighbors like we do. So shout out to Caleb and Molly. You rock. And the rest of you, I just feel sorry for you that you don't have them as neighbors. So, neener. Okay. Also, before we start, I want to make sure, I keep forgetting to do this in the podcast. If you have questions, if you have things that you'd like us to talk about, if you have questions about the things that we talk about, you can be involved in this podcast. I would love to hear from people outside the United States. I get emails from people inside the United States, but I really get tickled when I get people that email me from India and Germany and France, and I would love to get an email from somebody in Finland. It's like on my bucket list. Don't ask me why, because I'm not going to tell you. But I want to hear from somebody in Finland because I think you rock. Simon gets why I like people from Finland so much.
Yeah, it's a spoiler that only I can have.
Anyway, so send your emails, your questions, and your comments to hello@lifeoffiction.com, and we will answer them. When we get an email, we make the questions from our listeners the priority over the idea list that we are making the show from. So, also, I want to make sure that I let everyone know, guess what? I am finally, after all these years, I am updating my Advanced Worldbuilding guide, the actual book with the upchuck method. I'm going to include dozens of new trigger questions to help you invent, create, and expand your world faster than ever before. And I'm so excited to do this because I'm going to figure out how to make a print version, but I'm excited because if you buy them through my site and get them through us, it will be the only place that you can get the downloadable advanced printable PDFs with the templates for characters and plants and lore and events and all this. You can't get them anywhere else unless you go and you buy the big 400-page journals, which is awesome. And we have, Simon knows. Simon uses them. I use them. I've got, I don't know how many, like 20, 25 of those things sitting on the shelf behind me here in the office. But this will allow you to get a digital version of the book, instruction book, and the downloadable printable templates in PDF. So you can print them out whenever you want, as many as you want. So that's coming at the beginning of this next year. So I'm excited about that. And the last thing that I don't know if I've ever asked this before, but if you like this podcast, if you're enjoying what Simon and I are doing, we're struggling to figure out what to do. Please leave us a 5-star review, on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you listen to this. Really would appreciate some reviews. We want to know if we're doing a good job for you. We just want to hear from you. So anyway, that's it. So the rest of this, I'm excited about this conversation. Simon, it is all yours.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, take it away.
So we were talking about the Dragon's Chasm and some of the different layers and stuff. And I went over some of the basic things about the Dragon's Chasm that made it different. The atmospheric cloud that was used, as well as the
very bottom.
The very bottom. We did the very top, which is kind of funny. Now we're going to do the middle. I talked about the roots, the floating islands, the salt content, the moisture in the air, stuff like that. Some of the basic things that the entire Dragon's Chasm shares.
Okay.
And all the levels. So let's see. Since we kind of wing these, I just...
Well, I mean, we made sure that we still had the map this week. So, I mean, how far did we go? Because you did
we got this bracket right here, and then this one way down there.
I need to get my glasses. No, but you had the names because we talked about. Just jab my moron! I jabbed myself in the eye with my own glasses. Hold on, let me look at this. So, but because we talked about what Finley made the depth numbers.
Yeah,
and then it goes down to the floor, and then we talked about at the last part of our last episode, talked about that it went down into the negatives, and that's when we were talking about the actual the cavern where it just is like dark.
Yep.
And
Dark,
silent and deadly. But if you decide to drink something that's liquidy down there, it might be pure water. But you have all these sections. Okay, I know you can't look. You can't see what I'm doing right now. I'm looking at this sheet of paper, and on the right hand side, actually, wait.
If you go to the last podcast,
I have the picture from my cell phone, and you can see on the right hand side there are all these brackets. This is what I'm trying to understand, Simon. So you've got these brackets, you've got the numbers, and then you've got
Preclidorius,
Yep, and then Clidorius,
cloud canopy,
cloud canopy,
knock
nook.
shelves.
Oh, knock shelf. Oh, see, that's why I need my glasses. That's not nook. I was like, oh, you can read the shelves. No, knock shelves. Okay,
Knock shelves. No, that's a
mid,
C.
and then mid climb, debris shelves. I'm actually interested in knowing what the debris shelves are. But let's go
that's
from
a good place.
let's go from top down.
Yeah, seeing as how that's kind of just how it works when you descend into madness, right? You gotta go from the top to bottom.
Descend into fun.
Well, it's fun when you have the external perspective, but if you were a person inside, if in this real situation, it wouldn't be as fun as you think.
Yeah, but isn't this kind of like life? These people that do these crazy things to test fate. I mean, shouldn't we just leave them to fate and go from there? I mean, if you make the choice to do something stupid like go and dwell in a place where at least 85% of all the dragons actually live, are you think you're going to go do that and not get eaten or bitten or something? We haven't even gotten into the fungal horror down here. We're not even getting into the plants and stuff. So
That's coming. That's coming.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, all right. So top to bottom, we did Preclidorius, the cliffs, right? And that was, I think, the reason why we covered that and the negatives, the top and the very bottom. I don't think I explained this last time. That the reason why I explained both of those first, rather than just going from top to bottom, is that those two are kind of, they're kind of separate. They're more external. Like the Preclidorius, it's above that cloud. It's above the atmosphere. So it's technically still part of the Dragon's Chasm, but it's more separate, seeing as how it's above the atmosphere and out in the open. And then the underbelly caverns, one, they haven't been studied a whole ton. They aren't talked about a whole ton. They aren't explored very much, and they are very different from the rest of the levels. So the other, 6 levels are the main sections of the Dragon's Chasm.
Okay.
So we have once you hit that cloud. So I said in the last one it was 7 layers or 8, but that depends on whether you count the cloud as a level in and of itself. So it's thick enough and big enough that there are actually creatures that specialize in hunting and living inside the dense atmosphere. When I say that, I mean, and I'm saying it's dense. Like if you got there, you wouldn't be able to see 5 inches in front of your face.
Well, and we did mention that you've been designing like breathing apparatus and things like that. So
so it's a really interesting place for some of these creatures to survive, seeing as how they've got to have specialized senses, seeing as how you can't see. There's one.
Well, plus, weren't you, when we were talking, we should also talk about dragons after this, but didn't you say that also when we were discussing certain dragons, how they have a filter thing that filters out the salt and things there?
Well, yeah, and that's actually part of how they breathe fires. They collect some of the, just in breathing, and in eating, they collect the necessary chemical composites to create a chemical called benzene. It's highly flammable. And they use that in their ignifera system or to create fire. Anyway, but that's a whole nother thing, right? So yes, they do have kind of a filter. Everything down here that can breathe has a very specialized lung system, but most of them, lots of the dragons, when they come out of the Dragon's Chasm, they can still breathe in this separate environment. It just takes a little bit of a painful transition from the thick, moist, salty, dense air to the more normal.
Okay, so you saying that it's so what's going through my mind is that, all right, so we're saying that happens with the dragon, because we know that there are lots of breeds of dragons that come out of the Dragon's Chasm that
and that live in other places.
So, but what you're saying is that this is such a specialized environment that this is leading me to believe that a good portion of the creatures that live down there would not survive outside that environment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And which is actually a very good thing, seeing as how most of the things down here are so dangerous,
like the fungal
and
horror.
So super adaptive. If they could survive out of the Dragon's Chasm, they would very quickly take over the continent.
Okay.
So it's very convenient that these monsters are kept at bay, seeing as with this atmosphere that just it acts as a wall. Very few things can come out. The dragons
Yay for walls.
are generally they're the exception. They can come out and they can change, and they can breathe in the other environment. The difference is leaving an oasis and going into a desert, and none of them want to do that. There's all the food down there. There's all the fun down there. There's all the other dragons down there.
Right.
So you might come into contact with them outside every once in a while. But it's very, very rare.
You know, that kind of sparks an idea. Do you think that it might be that dragons also come out during different times of seasons because maybe the environment outside is more similar to, like for example, if it's, not spring but maybe fall, where it's closer to a hot, wet, type environment in there, then it might be easier for them to adapt, that maybe that's when they come out.
I think to a degree, yes.
I just mean more likely.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that does happen with the change of seasons. They will come out every once in a while a little bit more. But again, it's just because there's such a huge difference between the outside world and the dragon's chasm. Even if there is a slight change with the season, it's not going to be significant enough to actually really affect their lifestyle.
Okay.
Part of what this atmosphere does is it makes so that the effect of season change isn't nearly as strong or visible in the dragon's
down
chasm.
in the chasm. Well,
So-
that's understandable.
So you could be walking around in the hot summer or the cold winter with snow everywhere, and you go into the dragon's chasm, and it's more or less going to be the same.
Okay. All right. And that makes sense too.
I mean, it depends. If there's a rainy season and more moisture is going into the dragon's chasm,
Than usual.
then stuff like that will affect things, right? But
Like if there was a
temperature
monsoon
wise,
season, right?
temperature-wise, it's got a very, very fluent and
Well, this is pretty dense here at the top, right? With the
that
cloud,
and
with
that
the
and
clouds
part of what it is because it's on a fault line with all those hotbeds and geysers and stuff.
Well,
it's got its own heating system.
Plus,
and
you
it's
got
just
plus we've got, in which way I don't think that we described last time. You've got the pinpoint to the west and to the east. They both go across the continent to the point where one side goes to, even though you have volcanic, the heat down below, you actually one side. I'm trying to think. Is it east? That's east. So that east. And I'd have to look at the map. Yeah, what is the map up here? So this would be. Sorry, I'm looking at a map on my wall. I've got a great big blown up map of the world. So that's north. So that would be east. That would be west. Correct.
Yep.
So on the east side, that's where the major volcanoes are that we have on the map. Whereas you have the Kraken Mountains there on the west, and we know that there is water and tunnels where the ocean water is coming in underneath from the mines. Okay.
It's pouring.
All right.
It's
See,
pouring
that makes
into
sense.
the cavern. So yeah, that's with season change. It's not a very prevalent thing in the Dragon's Chasm. It more or less remains the same year round.
Okay.
Anyway, so let's see. The cloud. That's right. There are dragons and there are species that have adapted to and have specialized themselves to thrive inside of the cloud itself.
Okay.
I wouldn't. It's a very minute percentage of the the space that it takes up is very small in and of itself. It's maybe I'd say 20 to 30 feet thick from top to bottom, this atmosphere of thick, dense cloud. And then it starts thinning out from there.
Okay.
But it does stretch over the entire expanse, and there are creatures that come in and out of it. And just below it, in the cloud canopy, it's still very misty and hazy, and there are creatures that have adapted to hunt without using sight. Let's see, I've got my notes right here. For example,
I still love that picture. We need to get that done as a huge map.
Yeah,
Put
we do.
pins on it.
Oh, here we go. One of the Fadewing dragon. It has a very very unique hunting style. What it does is it'll drop below the cloud and call out to one of the other creatures, a prey it sees, even though what it considers prey are actually what consider it prey. So it'll look at a creature. It'll look at a creature that would otherwise devour it, and lead it into the cloud, where it and its buddies have the advantage because they
mobile aerial piranha.
Yeah, pretty much. So it'll dip below and use itself as bait, and then bring up one of the larger creatures into the cloud where they can't see, and then its little pack will devour them there. So you see these purple little beautiful little dragons. It's about maybe the size of a medium-sized dog. They're not that big, but they, in groups of about 20, they can still take down some full-sized beast.
Oh man!
If it can get it up in the clouds. Anyway, but out of that cloud, it is definitely lower on the food chain. It can't do a whole ton. But things like that, where they've specialized in using the cloud itself as use it for their own stuff, right?
Awesome.
Anyway, so there's that, and then below that, the cloud canopy. That's just below the cloud. It's oftentimes very misty and hazy. There's not you can see, but it's kind of there's just a constant mist, right?
Okay.
As the it's still fading out of the cloud.
Huh.
The canopy is almost all open space. Open space, underground. It's not as dark as the further depths. You still got a little bit of light that is able to go through the clitorius.
Okay.
So there's a slight kind of twilight from the sun.
Okay.
But it's a lot of open space, and I can call it a canopy because there are lots of plants down there that they grow to great heights. In fact, there are mushrooms, fungus, that can grow 40, 50 feet tall.
Oh,
just massive things, and grow very tough, fibrous material.
Oh, I was going to say, dang, that's a lot of yummy hamburgers. That's all I'm thinking.
No, not really. And everything down here tastes like salt, so I mean.
Oh, lovely. Hey,
Anyway.
but self-preserved. No?
Yeah, all you have to do to make jerky is just leave it in the open for like 2 seconds. Anyway, so this canopy, right? And because it's a lot of open space, it actually is. It is generally where most of the bigger dragons and some of the medium-sized ones, it's where they go through most of their mating and breeding. Far enough off the ground that it's safe from the fungals and the scavengers, and below the clouds, so it's still a good environment, a perfect environment for them to live in and grow up in. So that's often where you'll see lots of them mating or laying eggs. However, because lots of the meatier creatures, the things that they prefer to hunt, live lower, it's not a good hunting ground. So you won't see any dragons you do encounter are likely to be aggressive due to their nests being nearby.
Okay.
Or mating.
I was going to ask about the nest. So
Yeah, mating females or males
these
in
upon the
area.
walls or upon the floating.
They're on the islands, on the walls, and some of them find ways to do it on top of the fungus canopy and the plants. Right.
Okay.
They get. It depends on the species. They all have specialized nests.
Okay.
In fact, some of them will carry the not dead, but dormant corpse of a fungal whore and lay the eggs inside of it.
Oh.
And if you try to rip into it to get to the eggs, it'll wake up. So there are a dragon that has it uses the narcophosphorin to keep it asleep, and it uses it as a security system. If another dragon tries to get to its eggs, the fungal whore wakes up and eats it.
Oh my God.
And then it comes back, puts it back to sleep, and takes care of its babies.
Dude, there's a whole nother level of just freaky
So
stuff.
if you see a sleeping fungal whore on the canopy where
Walk
none
away.
of them live up there, and none of them can survive up there, don't go messing around with it. Don't wake it up.
Okay.
Anyway, and so The cloud canopy, it's not a very good hunting ground, and mostly just the creatures that can fly and are good at aerial combat and things like that. That's where they do their stuff. It is a canopy. There's not a whole lot of solid ground for anything to move across. So the cloud canopy, then we go to the knock shelves. So there's a very prominent and specific plant, the knock vines. It's kind of an adapted coral. They make a very hard, kind of bony grow bed out of hard natural material, and then they grow these massive, long vine-like tentacles that they reach out and grab onto things. It's kind of like these roots we were talking about, these massive ones, but much smaller scale.
Okay.
But they're very prominent because nothing on them is actually, except to a very few select creatures, is actually edible or digestible in like any way. That they're pretty much useless to most of the creatures that live there. A few of them will nest on them or live in them or use them as an environment to live on, but they aren't.
There's no actual use.
They're literally just there to.
There's no food.
They're terrain,
quality.
and there's pretty much it. There's no food quality of them. It's a hard, tough, fibrous material with little to no nutritional value.
So this is if anything, it's a building material, but that's basically it.
Yeah, and so there are some very kind of slow, cumbersome creatures that will get up there and chew up the softer, younger vines. But it doesn't give them enough nourishment to really be any sort of large.
I wonder
predator.
if that'll end up being a resource for Pinwheel.
Well, it is what it is, but the quality that it does have and the use that it does have is that its tough fibrous material is waterproof, acid-proof, and fire-resistant. So when you use the vine material and you can cut it up and they make kind of strips out of it or a leather-like substance, but it's plant material, and they use it on the suits sometimes. Or as armor because it's resistant to a lot of the very dangerous chemicals and things.
I wonder if you can break it down into fiber, like when you pull bark off of a tree and the shreds underneath, it's still a softer version or a thinner version of that bark. And I just wonder.
And so you can pull the fibrous material out of kind of the insides of them as well, and use that. They use that to make the ropes mostly, because when you're traversing an environment where almost all of the terrain is vertical, it's all climbing.
Yeah.
It's all and even though you're underground, but you're still flying through the air because you've got all these floating islands and cliff walls and massive fungus,
Right.
And because of that, you need a lot of more. You have to have very specialized mobility skills. So they use a rope system and the Explorer suits that I'm still designing. And rope is your lifeline. You run out of rope, you're going to get stranded on a floating rock until you get eaten, or you're going to get lost in some...
We talked about that before. There's got to be ways, there will be ways, especially with those who are doing research with Pinwheel, because you were talking about having, certain areas where they have certain caches of different items, and you have emergency items in different places. So they have markers. If this happens, then get to this marker. You have these particular tools. You have these emergency tools, things like that. Yeah.
And so there are a few things items that that when in the Dragon's Chasm, they're just as important as food and water. You run out of them, you're pretty much dead. And there are a few that survivors, and they're the elite of the elite. They're the leaders, the ones who have incredible stories of survival where they did run out of rope and they found some other way to keep moving and to get away from these predators, because none of the humanoid creatures that can go into Dragon's Chasm have adapted in any way to physically compete with the agility, the speed, the strength, and the power, the brute primal aggressiveness of just everything there. That it takes a lot of specialized equipment for you to do things, but there are a few who can survive off of a bare minimum for at least a few days. And And those are some cool stories.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm gonna love developing people and situations and stories about that. Or, one of the other things that will really be fun is we need to talk with Finley and see if we can get like journal entries and things like that, and we can publish those. That would be fun.
And the cool thing is Finley's not. He's not the first person to go down there and try to explore. So he's actually found journal and notes and stuff from people who have tried to do stuff down there but didn't have the know-how and didn't make it. And they've tried at least to kind of scratch the surface. Not successfully, but there have been other attempts. I mean, if there's this massive cavern full of mystery and wonder, I mean, how are you going to keep people from trying?
We're not going to keep people from
exactly.
trying. We're just going to share stuff.
Those. Anyway, so the knock shelves, they're pretty high up and they're just below the canopy. So there is more.
So this is the
vegetation.
Wouldn't I was going to say the knock shelves, wouldn't that end up being it's like the baseline of it's not the ground, but it's the baseline of places that you could land and dwell and eat things and whatever, because it's mainly vegetation, correct?
Yeah. Well, what it is it's high enough off of the ground. It's still kind of like in the trees. I mean, if you look at a tree, you've got the canopy of the tree, right? The very, very top.
Right.
And the creatures that occupy that are generally, the bigger birds and the stuff, right? Anyway, but if you go down to kind of the top middle part of the tree, you'll find other creatures, things like if we use a rainforest, for example, you'll find like monkeys and sloths and things like that.
I was thinking like squirrels and owls.
There are things that do live up there, but they are specialized as well to live in a more aerial environment, as in they don't touch the ground very often.
But it's the top of the vegetation that's going down, correct? Okay.
And so there's enough vegetation there that there are things that live there, and in abundance too. But this is kind of it's the beginning of the hunting zone for the dragons, where this is where they do a lot of their hunting, their moving, and their exploring.
Sweet. Okay.
At about this height is where lots of the things that fly really spend their time.
So is this also where you're running out of space for free flying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's enough space for free flying, though, that these creatures that specialize in flight can still be very effective.
Nice.
So this is where lots of the larger dragons will kind of browse. And if so what it is the closer you get to the ground, the bigger the creatures can be, because not very much this high up can support the higher off the ground you are, and the less vegetation and the less things to land on, things to be on, you need to be, the more agile you need to be, the more you need to be able to cover more distance, right?
Right.
So the closer you get to the floor, the bigger the creatures get. So any of the very large, substantially sized dragons don't actually hunt primarily up here. They still go farther down.
Okay.
So yeah, the knock shelves, and it's called the knock shelves, and it's named after that specific plant because it thrives very well here.
Okay.
And that's kind of the prime attribute of of this environment. Anyway, and then you go down to the mid climb. Now this is like the hot spot for everything. It's the meeting point between the sky
aerial
and
the ground. Okay.
So all the things that fly and hunt in the sky, and all the things that can move around on the ground, they kind of meet in the mid climb, because there's enough shelves and floating islands that are just high enough. All the vegetation, you can climb up to this point without really feeling like you've left the ground. It's technically still
the
pretty
fight
high
zone.
up.
That's what it sounds like. It's the fight zone.
So this is where a lot of the stuff happens, because this is where a lot of the things meet.
Okay.
So it's the largest and the most populated out of all of the zones. And that's, I think, where
I can see in your drawing, that's where you've got a lot of the showing the fungal, the mushrooms. And
Yeah, and so there's another thing to explain about the Dragon's Chasm. It's because when you go deeper and deeper into it, it's devoid of sunlight. Things that live off of sunlight, like plants, don't grow. So what's become of the Dragon's Chasm is it's still full of life and full of plants, but they generally show up in two forms: fungus and coral. There's actually enough moisture in the air that like a much more adapted version of coral grows all over the walls and can still, pass spores through air currents that's very thick with moisture and things like that, where nothing's dry, nothing stays dry.
I think coral is not only awesome, it's quite beautiful, the patterns
It
and
is.
structure.
And so there are parts of this that it's very colorful and it's very
going to be a
beautiful.
fun thing to draw.
So coral and mushrooms, that's a good amount of what lots of this is. And then some of the specialized plants like the knock vines and these the massive snake-like roots that just hold everything together.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so with the mid-climb, that's actually where lots of the fungal horrors start showing up, and some of the bigger ones can make it. So let's see, mid-climb, I've kind of got like a food chain list right here.
And
got the level 10.
Just, so not to cut you off, just one moment, is if you've not listened to the fungal horror when Hoban ended up going and visiting Finley at Pinwheel and did an interview, it's kind of humorous because they got locked in a decontamination chamber because a fungal horror actually infected some of the crew members, or one of the crew members, I can't remember.
Yeah, just one.
Anyway, and was roaming around causing harm in the station. And so you can, I think it's in one of the bonus tracks on lifeoffiction.com. You should go check that out, though. It's Hoban's attempt to do an interview with Finley and trying to get Finley to be serious while they're trapped in there. So,
but it happens so often. He has a hard time considering it. Like,
but I like that they're such close friends. So, and it's funny because all the things that make both of them crazy are the aspects of their personalities that the other person admires so much. So it's kind of like I kind of imagine Finley and Hoban kind of like how they interact with each other, very similar to your brother and Alvin when they get together. There's like so my son and my grandson, who they're both 7, and neither one of them will venture and do many things, but you put them together and they're absolutely fearless. And yeah, so that's kind of how I always imagine Hoban and Finley.
That makes sense.
So two sides of the same coin. So you put them together and they're whole, and it's like, let's go get this done.
Go anywhere, do anything. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of their attitude. So anyway, and because the mid climb, because everything is kind of meeting here, a lot of the bigger creatures, or some of the bigger creatures, can actually make it up this high and still be effective hunters. What it is it's where you find the most diversity. Things that are faster and agile hunters, and things that are slower. There are things that ambush predators. Because the other thing about the mid climb is it's got the most vegetation. Everything that grows here, generally, the life cycle of plants here and some animals that live here is much faster because there's a lot of stuff going on.
That's what I was going to ask. It sounds like this would need to be the speed adaptation.
Yeah, this is kind of this is also the hotspot for the special adaptations.
It's
where
the
everything's
do or die.
It's the battleground where you gotta learn, and you gotta everybody's trying to one up everybody else.
Yeah, and
so the mid climb is actually, and hilarious enough, it's one of the areas that's richest in natural as in biological resources, as in some of the best plants to find there, and all the ones that can be used in the most variety you'll find in the mid climb, with all the beasts fighting, right?
Cool.
So.
Well,
definitely.
if you've got carcasses and blood being spilt and things
Oh, yeah.
like, you've got all this protein, all these things that are feeding that whole ecosystem. So that makes sense.
Anyway, and you've got a few different classifications of animals that are generally that are known for different things. So you've got the dragons, but that's a much more varied thing. There are many different subspecies of or many different classifications of dragon and subspecies and all that. So dragon varies a lot, and it's kind of just a phylum or a group of reptiles that lives down there.
Wow.
And then other members there are, well, the fungal horrors. That's actually a pretty specific class or family of fungus that occupies the corpses and uses them as a...
But isn't the fungal horrors, don't they actually primarily, not all, but don't they primarily either start or more abundantly dwell in the debris shelf?
Yeah, so what it is
and that's the next one down
yeah,
from the mid-climb,
what I'll
right?
explain is that they actually start out, most of them will start out on the lower, on the
Debris shelves.
The debris shelves and the canyon floor is where they'll start developing.
Because that's where everything falls.
So it's kind of
carcasses,
kind of an arc. They'll start down there, and as they get bigger and bigger and stronger, they can compete more and climb higher. And then at the height and climax of their existence, they'll get to the mid climb, and they'll be very effective hunters. But the more mass they collect and the bigger they get, they start to get too heavy, too cumbersome, and too slow, and they descend back down. And so something that Finley's seen of the going in and out of the underbelly is massive, and I mean like giant house-sized, building-sized monsters that are so slow, very slow, but if they come into contact with something their size that can be devoured.
Well, but it's just like on when we did the fungal horror, and when I did that article, we got the picture on there when you gave me the picture to adapt of the fungal horror taking over the corpse of a dragon. Mm-hmm. I mean, it collects its resources and its fuel as it's going, and that's that was when it really started freaking me out, realizing, oh wait, it can go along and consume everything it needs in its own time and store up that energy to do its hunting. Oh,
and the thing about the fungal horror is that when it devours something, there's no waste product. Everything that it can absorb for energy, it'll absorb for energy, and anything it can't, it uses as the building blocks for getting bigger. Since it can't develop its own bones and it can't really develop its own skins, it uses the bones and skins of the animals it comes in contact with. So when it collects enough of the remains of its prey, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes so large that it can no longer sustain itself, and it breaks apart, falls apart, spreads its spores, and starts over.
Yep.
So the mid-climb is where they kind of reach their climax of ability, where they can be fast, but they're also big enough to take on some of the larger dragons, and they can compete very well with everything else, and lots of them make it to the top of the food chain and then slowly go down. So most of these creatures kind of have a set part in the food chain. The fungal horror moves up and down as it gets bigger or smaller.
Well, I was thinking about the fungal horror and realizing, we've been talking about that cycle, and I wonder when it gets large enough. It seems like, especially if it reaches the mid climb, it seems to me that because I know in the article that we wrote, that we put on World Anvil, it talks about that it uses stores its energy to be able to hunt, right? Mm-hmm. But if it has no waste and it's using all that energy, it sounds like to me one of the challenges that it would have is that if you get a fungal horror that makes it to the mid climb, and all the dragons do is stay away from it, it's going to burn through its energy.
And it'll
slowly die. Yeah. Okay, I got that right.
And so oftentimes some of them will die and they'll fall apart and they'll kind of go back to stage one, is when if they don't get enough food and enough in a span of time.
You can't sustain it, huh?
Yeah. And so if you find one that is actually if the explorers find one that is more aggressive and that is much faster, and because it is a fungus and it's not as a complex or let's see, coordinated creature as anything more
Right.
as any one species. It's a colony of fungus working together with a very complex neurological system that they kind of grow with each other. For one to be fast and more agile, one to be quick enough to catch some of the other dragons, it's got to have a lot more energy to burn, because the muscle-like tissues that it uses to move,
those colonies,
are not very energy efficient. They burn a lot more energy moving than our muscles do.
Okay.
So if it's fast and if it's aggressive, that means it's had meals in quick succession for the past while.
All right, that makes sense.
And so if you find one that's slow and lumbering, it's kind of it's running out, and you can stay away from them. Anyway, so that's the fungal horror. So there are the dragons, right? And then there's some other more prominent species like the let's see, the cockatrice. These massive centipede-like creatures that are kind of the boon of most other classifications of creature, where they vary in size from smaller to larger, but they'll devour dragons, and they specialize in eating dragons specifically.
Goodness.
They're the one creature that them and the dragons have a rivalry, but they generally come out on top.
Yeah.
And it's the other creatures of the dragon's chasm that keep the cockatrice in check, so that they don't eat all the dragons.
That's one of those. Okay.
Massive centipedes, and they're very, very vicious, very scary creatures. And there are aspects or places in the dragon's chasm where they have a kind of an overpopulation problem, where there's just so many cockatrice that live there, and those are kind of graveyards where the dragons avoid, because there's just so many. Anyway, and so there's like the coral reaper cockatrice. What it is, the very brightly colored one, and it grows. Well, what it does is it'll chew up knock vine, any knock vine that it can reach. It'll chew it up and kind of it'll lay it on its back and use it and create kind of a growing bed for coral, and it'll grow coral on itself as camouflage, and then strike from the coral, and then lay down in the coral and ambush passing prey. So things like that, where these creatures are, I'd say most of the stuff down here, they're actually fairly intelligent, because what it is the pattern with most creatures in nature is that the predators have to be smart. They have to be smart to catch and to it just takes more intelligence to feed off of other living things than it does to go find plants, right?
Okay.
So the predator, but because everything down here is a predator, even the things that eat plants. I mean, if you eat mushrooms, but your mushrooms turn into massive monsters, you're still a predator.
That's
even
true.
If you eat mushrooms.
That's true.
So most of the creatures down here are still, they have predator intelligence. And that being the case, everything's got to get smarter in order to compete.
Everything has
else.
to adapt.
There's no.
That sounds like life.
Yeah, and it's kind of just on like a fast forward.
Nobody
it happens so
owes
fast.
you jack, cupcake. Get off your butt and go earn it. That's what I tell my kids.
Anyway, and then there are some a few other elements that kind of just make the mid climb a very, very prominent hotbed for activity.
Yep. So that's the battlegrounds. Then we've got what? Then we've got the debris shelves.
Debris shelves. So that's kind of, it dips below the mid climb, and because a lot of stuff happens in the mid climb and life is a lot faster there, most of the waste from it, things that die off that they don't have time to kind of decay and rot in the mid climb or be processed, they fall into this lower the debris shelves. So the debris shelves collects the debris, the bones, the dead material.
I would think
of
that
everything above it.
I would, yeah, and I would also think that would be something like when there's fights that you have pieces of the carcasses that maybe other things that might not want to engage and fight in the mid climb. Wait for the scraps from the table to fall down into the debris shelves.
And that's what the debris shelves is. It's a lot of scavengers, a lot of creatures that go and find the remains of the more apt predators, and that's what they live off of. And the cool thing is that you can say it's a scavenger, so it's not likely as big or as strong. But if everything, if a 5-ton dragon is killed by a 6-ton dragon, and his body falls down into the debris shelves, and a few of his buddies do as well, then you can afford to be a 10-ton scavenger. So you have massive monsters that you can call them scavengers, but they're not afraid to pick up a little guy that can't get away.
Well, this is where the buffet is. This is the buffet
that's
shelf.
what it is. And so one of the more prominent classifications of creature down here are the land crabs, these massive crabs that actually, because of the very high protein diet and abundance of nutrients, they can grow to very, very large sizes. And some of them look like little moving islands in and of themselves, and they feed off of the corpses and what's left. The debris shelves is where most, if not all, of the fungal horrors start, where the fungus finds root on the remains of other things. And so lots of the fungus that grows down here as well, lots of the ones that actually produce bioluminescent spores. They grow down here in the debris shelves, and then they send the spores upwards to the other. So
this is the major source of light.
Yeah, so it creates the light and then sends the light up to the upper levels. So the debris shelves on up they give light to the mid climb and the knock shelves.
Well, we're coming up on the hour mark already, and
there's one more. So
okay, so let's do this. See if we can crank this out.
And then the canyon floor, the very bottom, or what
they thought was the
very bottom. Yeah. Where down here, not even a whole ton of the debris makes it down to the very bottom, the very base, where you can actually touch the ground and say that, this is the bottom, because it's what's touching lots of the fault line. It's very often where you will find large geysers and hotbeds and stuff like that, and it'll collect pools of very thick chemicals that can't evaporate.
Okay.
So you won't find like pools of water, and instead of a hot spring, you'll find one of just boiling chlorine.
But isn't this also where there's the densest part of the vegetation? I mean,
the canyon floor?
Yeah.
No, actually, it's pretty bare. Mostly because there's not a whole ton of the nutrients makes it down here, because most of it is processed in the mid climb and the debris shelves.
Okay,
and what does make it down here is devoured quickly by the smaller scavengers that live.
But my question is that if you've got plants and things like that, I guess maybe I'm just thinking on a vertical, is that then where are the fungal and everything? Is everything just attached to canyon walls? Because that wouldn't seem to be.
Oh, so
do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah.
there's a bottom where there's plants or roots or something. This is just the way my mind's working, thinking of a garden. So, it's just, there isn't just, I know there's stuff growing out from the walls, but are we just talking about like jutting stone and things like that are coming up far enough away from the base of the canyon floor?
Yeah, and to a degree. So think of it,
because
like
everything's not flat.
Yeah.
So
think of it like this. It's if you look at if you take a mountain range, and it's got a bunch of different mountains. I don't mean like one set of mountains. I mean a bunch of different mountains with a bunch of different canyons.
Right.
And you put it at the bottom of a massive canyon, and that canyon has walls that are sticking out and has towers of rock that just reach up into the sky all around the mountains and on the mountains, as well as all the plants that reach out from the side and from this top, and there's a lot of stuff to fill that space.
Sure.
And so when I say canyon floor, I mean the valleys of the mountains at the bottom.
Okay, that makes sense.
I mean the very, very base. Most of the stuff there's a lot of things to catch falling stuff before you get there. And I could probably illustrate it. I could draw it out and make it make more sense if I drew it out.
No, I get it now, and well, we're still going to draw it out, but we need to show people.
So the canyon floor it's pretty barren because it's the little cracks where the geysers and the hotbeds form, and so there are stuff that can survive off of those, and also it's pretty dark because lots of the light producing stuff is in the debris shelves.
Okay.
And mid climb, it's kind of. It gets a little darker.
It's where the darkness begins, eh?
Yeah, but it's bright as freaking sunlight when you go in comparison to the underbelly. You drop down there, there's a heavy darkness, as in you can feel it. Anyways, and so the canyon floor, the cool thing about the canyon floor is it houses one of the more specific species that just enjoys down there. Still trying to figure out what to call them because I suck at names, but they're these massive tortoise-like creatures that live very slow. But the cool thing about them is that they've developed a tough enough shell and skin, and they can actually live, surprisingly enough, pretty leisure lives that not very many of the creatures can actually find it worth it to attack them. Even some of the larger dragons, there's just much easier stuff to catch and eat in the mid-climb or even the debris shelves. And if you want to go all the way to the canyon floor, then you're going to have to fight a 20-ton massive turtle and then break through its 5 to 10 foot thick shell. It's hard as rock, and then you can get to stuff like it's just not worth it to a lot of creatures. But what you will find every once in a while is the biggest of the fungal horrors that can't live in the mid climb, and they can't live even in the debris shelves. And as they come into that last stretch of their life where they're just massive lumbersome creatures, and they lock in battles with these massive tortoises on the canyon floor. And so every once in a while you'll find huge lumbering brute against a huge lumbering brute, and so it's no longer this fast-paced, agile lifestyle. It's kind of colossus against colossus, and everything's slower.
And now you know where to go find turtle soup.
There we go. I mean, if you can get inside the turtle.
Yeah. Simon, I'm so grateful that you're willing to go through this, and I'm excited to learn more and more, and I love the drawings. I hope you've enjoyed today's show with world building, and as always, thank you, Simon, for being here with me.
Okay.
We are going to go over a lot more world building because next time what I really would like to talk about, if it's okay with you, I really want to go over dragons. I want you to find that.
The specific dragons.
Specific dragons, the types, and the things like that. Because we're going to get closer and closer to the Verdra. And maybe we can read a little bit from Prelude, that section where they talk about the lore from there. But I'd like to go over that.
Dragons.
Anything else you want to add?
That we've only scratched this.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be around for a while. There's a lot, like I said, life of fiction. This is about wanted hero, and this world is gargantuan, and there's a reason for that. If you have not started the adventure, I'm telling you, you'll have a lot of fun. So you can start by getting the first 3 books in a single digital download. Just go to jointheadventuretoday.com, and if you tell a friend, you get 25% off, and so do they. And if you tell 3 friends, you can get 75% off, and they'll each get 25% off if you buy them together. We're trying to make it easy so you can have fun and enjoyment. Share it with your family members. If you're a parent, I normally don't say this because what child actually takes the book recommendation of a parent? I don't know of anybody. I didn't. Well, you have of me, but you're odd.
Yeah, I'm a weirdo. Absolutely.
But here's the thing. I wrote these books so I could close that generational gap with my own children. And so this is for everybody. I have written these things and continued to construct them. And now I'm building this world with my own children. And therefore, you having fun. Remember, if you have questions, email me at hello@lifeoffiction.com, and we will answer your questions.
Absolutely.
Okay. Remember, you are more than you think you are. And we'll talk to you next time.